When gardeners talk about feeding their soil, the focus is usually on top-dressing compost, mixing it into beds or brewing teas to pour around the roots. But what if there was a way to create a hidden food line beneath the soil, one that decomposes steadily, delivers nutrients directly to the root zone, and keeps feeding your plants for weeks without constant effort? That's exactly what the compost tunnel method does. In fact, this old technique has resurfaced because it solves several problems at once. It builds humus faster than a cold pile, it keeps nutrients from washing away in the rain, and it creates a moisture-rich environment that worms can't resist. The surprising part is that when done right, a compost tunnel can start nourishing your plants in just 30 days. What is a compost tunnel? A compost tunnel is a shallow trench dug between or alongside your plants, then filled with alternating layers of fresh organic waste, dry carbon material, and a little soil to cap it off. Instead of creating a separate pile and waiting months for it to mature, this method turns decomposition into a live underground process. Think of it as a buried composting pipeline. Microbes and worms break down the materials right where your crops can access them, while the soil above remains stable for planting and watering. Unlike surface mulching, which can dry out under the sun, or traditional compost piles that require turning, the tunnel works passively in the cool, dark environment beneath your garden. What makes it powerful is not only the speed, but also the efficiency. Since the organic matter is buried, nutrients aren't lost to evaporation or runoff. Instead, they stay locked in, moving slowly into the soil as decomposition advances. The tunnel becomes both a digestive system for organic waste and a feeding trough for your plants. The science behind why it works. Composting relies on microbes, fungi, and soil fauna working together to break down organic matter. When materials are buried, the surrounding soil acts like an insulator, holding in moisture and regulating temperature. This is key because the most active decomposers thrive in a moist, warm, oxygen-rich environment. A tunnel gives them exactly that. At the same time, worms play a starring role. Earthworms are naturally drawn to decaying matter. By digging a trench of half-rotted scraps, you're creating a buffet that lures them in. As they tunnel through, they not only consume the material but also drag bits of it deeper, mixing it with soil and leaving behind worm castings, some of the richest natural fertilizer known. Within a few weeks, the contents of your trench transform from smelly scraps into dark, crumbly humus that plants can directly feed on. The other science-backed advantage is root access. Plants don't need to wait for nutrients to be hauled from the topsoil. Instead, their roots grow toward the trench, tapping into a steady release of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and trace minerals. This direct connection accelerates plant growth and boosts resilience, particularly in poor or exhausted soils. How to build a compost tunnel. The method is simple, but a few details make the difference between success and wasted effort. Start by digging a trench about 1 spade deep and as long as you need, ideally between crop rows or in spaces where roots can spread toward it. The depth ensures that fresh material won't be exposed to pests or air dry, while still staying shallow enough for roots to find it. Right, so next comes layering. You want to begin with a base of rough material like chopped stalks, shredded cardboard or twigs. This allows airflow at the bottom, which is really important to prevent the tunnel from becoming a stagnant pit. Then add a layer of fresh nitrogen-rich material, things like kitchen scraps, grass clippings or manure. After that, follow up with a dry carbon layer. Leaves, straw or shredded paper will do the trick. Just keep repeating this sequence layer by layer until the trench is filled nearly to the top. Each nitrogen layer helps speed up decomposition, while the carbon balances it out and, keeps odours down. Finally, you'll want to cap the trench with about 2 to 3 inches of soil. This does 2 things. First, it seals in any smells that might attract pests, and second, It prevents the sun from drying out the top. Once it's covered, the tunnel basically disappears into the garden, leaving you with a nice, neat surface that can be watered, or depending on the depth, even planted over. Now, you might be wondering why 30 days is enough. Traditional compost piles often take 3 to 6 months to break down because they rely on bulk decomposition. A tunnel, however, works on a smaller scale and stays in much closer contact with soil life. With the right balance of greens and browns, plus keeping the moisture steady, decomposition is noticeably faster. Within about 30 days, the material has softened and partially broken down, releasing soluble nutrients into the surrounding soil. Pretty impressive, isn't it? That doesn't mean the tunnel is fully decomposed at that point. It continues to improve for months. But 30 days is when the first noticeable benefits arrive. Plants growing nearby often show a surge of growth as their roots reach into the nutrient-rich zone. Gardeners using this method have reported healthier foliage, better flowering and stronger resilience against stress compared to plants grown with surface compost alone. The long-term benefits, well, there's something to behold. While the immediate payoff is strong, the long-term gains are even more impressive. Every tunnel you create leaves behind a vein of humus in your soil. Over time, this increases the soil's capacity to hold water, improves its structure and makes it more forgiving in drought conditions. It also builds a deep reservoir of microbial activity that strengthens the natural soil food web. Another overlooked advantage is waste management. Instead of hauling organic matter to a pile or worrying about space for compost bins, tunnels allow you to recycle waste directly where it's needed. In small gardens, this saves precious space while ensuring nothing goes to waste. For gardeners in sandy soils, tunnels slow down the leaching of nutrients by binding them into humus. For those in clay-heavy soils, the process helps break up compaction, as worms and microbes leave behind porous channels. Either way, the result is soil that behaves more like living earth and less like a sterile medium. Right, so the compost tunnel isn't exactly a modern invention. Versions of this clever idea were actually used in ancient farming systems across Asia and Africa, where farmers learned to bury organic matter in planting trenches to enrich poor soils. Even during World War II, when victory gardens were all the rage to help feed families under rationing, similar trench composting methods were recommended for households with little space or resources. What's really remarkable, I think, is how these low-cost, resourceful techniques have stood the test of time, while many chemical shortcuts have come and gone. So, how do you put this into practice today? Well, to start, just pick one bed or row and create a tunnel before planting. That way the trench can begin breaking down as your young plants establish themselves. If you've got ongoing beds, you can dig a tunnel between rows without disturbing your crops too much, effectively feeding them mid-season. In perennial gardens, tunnels can be rotated around fruit trees or berry bushes to steadily enrich the root zone. And it's also possible to build tunnels seasonally. In spring, they can jumpstart crops after the winter soil lull. In summer, they serve as moisture reserves during those dry spells. And in autumn, tunnels are perfect for burying fallen leaves, stalks, and all that garden clean-up waste that would otherwise just pile up. The real beauty of this system is its flexibility. It doesn't require special bins, fancy inoculants, or any sort of machinery. All you need, really, is the organic matter you already produce and a willingness to bury it in the right place. The compost tunnel is honestly one of those forgotten gems of gardening, a method simple enough to require no equipment, yet powerful enough to transform struggling soil in just a month. By channeling decomposition underground, it turns waste into food, draws in worms, and builds a lasting foundation of fertility. In a world where so many gardeners chase quick fixes in bags and bottles, this method proves that nature's slow, steady systems are still the most reliable. If you found this guide useful and you're ready to try the 30-day compost tunnel in your own garden, make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven for more soil-smart methods that save time, money and effort. And share this with a fellow gardener who could use a boost in their soil's life. Because sometimes the most powerful solutions are the ones buried just beneath our feet.